Transformative Principal number 46 with Ken Daly. Welcome to Transformative Principal, where we interview real principals who are doing amazing things to help our students every single day. I'm your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. What I'd like to ask you to do is to take a survey. Tell me understand how I can provide a better podcast for you, those who are listening to it. Just go to transformativeprincipal.com, take a couple of minutes, take the survey that's right there on that landing page, and give me some feedback about how I can make this show better for you, about what kinds of things you would like to hear more of on the podcast, and also remind you to refer me some of your principal friends, people that you know that are making a real difference in kids' lives. Thanks so much for listening.
Okay, so my name is Ken Daly. I'm a high school English teacher. Mostly, I teach 11th grade in Wallingford, Connecticut, and I'm currently on year 2 of what's a half-time sabbatical. So I'm in a position where every other day I teach, and every other day I'm working on high school reform initiatives. The way our schedule works, we have block scheduling, so we see our students every other day. And because of that, that allows me to basically teach classes on the one day and not have any of the other, which again allows me to frees me up to do things like research and implementation of some of the initiatives going on in the district right now.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Tell me about how that position started. How'd you get involved with that? How was that set up?
We have a superintendent that's certainly very eager to make changes, and I think that the way it was told to me, he formed a lot of partnerships with businesses in our town, and in conversation with one person in the private sector, he heard that basically this person by his company had been taken offline with one other employee, so that instead of going to work like they normally would, their job was to look at best practices in their industry and see what improvements could be made. And someone in attendance said, that's interesting. They should really do that with teachers. And apparently that was the beginning of an idea. So that basically what happened was they took the first year 2 teachers and 1 administrator offline to on an innovation team, and that was a full-time one. So they basically came out of the classroom entirely, did a lot of research, did a lot of visiting of different schools, and then last year, that was the year that I started on it, and we had 1 administrator with a colleague of mine, and this year it's just the 2 teachers for a variety of reasons. But I guess the trick is, because as I've gone around to conferences and schools, I mean, this does seem like a pretty rare thing, a rare opportunity, and there's really, I'm surprised, there's like nothing like it, and it seems to be such a I don't know, it's a perfect idea. I think it's a lot of work, but it's a great idea. And I asked my superintendent point blank, why isn't this happening more widespread? Because I've had people like at Harvard reach out and say, how do I get something like that? Former students. And apparently the superintendent said you need someone who's willing to ask for money, because essentially what he has done is reached out to businesses in our town, uh, really some already existing relationships, and he basically asked for funding. And that funding, so this is separate from the Board of Ed budget, but that funding obviously is crucial and pays for someone to take on the classes that I'm not teaching the other 2 days. So again, it's a pretty simple idea, but I think really interesting one. And I think if change is going to do right, I think a lot of teachers agree changes need to happen. But I mean, there are days that I kind of wish it was a full-time situation. But I have to say, to do it every other day keeps one foot in the classroom. It means that things we're looking into, I can try out. It keeps me around my colleagues. It allows me to keep having conversations with them so they know what I'm up to. So I think as much as I feel like I have 2 jobs, it's a very unique position, but I've got one foot in 2 different places. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So what kinds of things are you looking at? You mentioned high school reform things, but what specifically are you spending your time doing on as part of that innovation team?
Right. So we were I'm actually, I got my master's at Quinnipiac University. That's in Hamden, and they're nice enough to open up part of their space at their College of Education for my colleague and I. So we've actually found it's as much as it's good to be on site the days we teach. If you're on site on my innovation day, I'm going to get sucked into things. I do a lot of stuff for the union, and it's just you see students, and it's good to even if it's down the road, be off site in order to focus. So we're looking at a few things. I think probably the biggest thing our district is doing is moving towards a mastery-based learning system,
Hmm.
mastery-based grading and learning. That takes, there are lots of different names. In New England, depending on which state you're in, it's either competency-based or it's mastery-based or it's standards-based. All those
Hmm.
words are loaded in different ways for different states. So
Right.
Connecticut's version is mastery. And our last, I don't know, the standardized tests kids used to take in Connecticut ruined the word proficiency forever. So we've moved away from that. But in any case, so that's probably the biggest thing. That's more of a multi-year process. It's going to take us a while to get there because I think if that's not done slowly and deliberately, I think it could be a disaster.
Hmm.
Although I'm intrigued by it. But again, it's good for me because I've been bringing some of those grading practices into my classroom. I've had conversations with kids about what they think of it. You know, I've got two AP classes right now in English, and these are kids who, to be honest, have benefited enormously from traditional grading. And so to ask them some tough questions about shifting that up and to see how they react has been, again, great for me. Other things we're working on. So the first innovation team did a lot of research, and I guess our job, even though we're researching too, is to start implementation. So we've started some district-wide committees. We have two high schools in our town. So my colleagues on the other side of town. So part of the goal when we form like a mastery-based learning committee is to make sure that we've got representation from both sides. We're also working on an issue on capstone. So basically bringing a capstone project requirement for graduation for seniors. So in the state of Connecticut, that was supposed to be a requirement in 2017. They pushed that back. So basically this year we're piloting 20 kids at each high school are doing a capstone project, which in many ways that's been probably the most implementation work we're doing because that's last year involved us looking at different districts that do capstone well and really taking the best of what they do. And so we wrote curriculum for it. We formed a committee to make sure that we had buy-in from all different types of subject areas. And now we're meeting with the students during the class and things like that. So the capstone's big, and I think in many ways when we look at a shift towards mastery-based learning, the way we've personalized learning, the way we've really talked about that is that really I think capstone's it's a really good microcosm for I think that larger shift. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, the various ways kids can demonstrate the same set of skills but get lots of choices in how they do that. And then two other things, we set up a bridge academy to bridge the gap between middle school and high school. So we worked on and last summer implemented a program for kids that were targeted as at risk for making that transition, for not making a great transition. So we set up a multi-week program to kind of get them ready and get them familiar and kind of build kind of team build with them. And then I'm trying to think. Um, those are a number of the things we're working on. Well, we also we're this year we're also piloting credit recovery, basically a system that allows students to make up lost credits as they go through the year. I don't know how widespread that is where you are.
Hmm.
It's very new to us. But again, I think the strength of this, I do wear a union hat in district. I think that a lot of teachers see a lot of potential for good ideas, but I think a lot of them around the country are maxed out. And I think by having teachers do the grunt work, I think that a lot of these initiatives they have more legitimacy, but also, I'm thinking like a classroom teacher all the time. It's not good enough for me that it's a good idea if it's not practical. We have to figure out how to make it work in ways that don't just, we don't just need to do what's right for kids. We need to give teachers what they need to give kids what they need. So I think in that
Absolutely.
sense, I'm actually really happy with where credit recovery is moving because, the traditional way to do it is basically through online.
Hmm.
Um, credit recovery systems, and what we heard from our teachers is they want FaceTime with their kids, and that's really what they need. And sticking a kid in front of a computer screen isn't an answer to their academic failure. So like insights like that, it's teachers talking with other teachers about what's working, what's not, and I think that's the best chance to not just replicate things well, but to we're because we're in the school and because we're teaching every day. I just think the problem solving happens kind of in real time. It's not being done to teachers. It's been being done by teachers, and I think that model's a good one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of power in that, and it's. I imagine that what you say carries a lot more weight than what an administrator may say when you say, "Look, I've been studying mastery based learning every other day. I've been starting to implement it in my classroom, and I'm doing it with my AP kids who, as you said, have benefited greatly from regular grading systems. And now this is how things are changing. This is what is being effective for all my students, not
Mm-hmm.
just the high or just the low kids, but for
Sure.
everybody. And I think that's really powerful.
Yep.
You said that an administrator was part of the innovation team before, but is not now. What is your perception on why that changed?
Uh, that's a good question. I think that, to be honest, the schedule of a teacher in my building, we have A days and we have B days, depending on the courses that day. And therefore, if they take away my B day classes, I can do this work. My principal doesn't operate on days and B days. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so he could, we could call it as innovation day, but if something happened, he needed to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was really the challenge. Um, we happened to have an administrative intern that year, which enabled last year, which enabled some of the work to be handed off. But I think the principal felt a good deal of disconnect. And again, you can't just say it's a B day. You don't have responsibilities. There are things that happen. We have two assistant principals as well, but I think it's easier to take a teacher offline in lots of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the many different hats that a principal wears, especially the building principal.
Right.
I think that kind of that was a pressure, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that it's completely understandable.
Yeah. So now you're with another high school teacher, correct?
Yep, it's the same. Yeah, same woman I worked with last year. That's
Okay.
correct.
And then you guys have the same schedule, so your both of your B days are the same, and you work together on these things, so you're not just going solo.
That's correct. That's correct, and I think that's really important. And like I said, we have two high schools in my town, so this has actually kind of brought that together as well. It is kind of strange how little, or I mean, I'm sure it's something we want to address in the future, but we do not have enough interaction across our high schools. I know that, K-12 vertical articulation or the integration and conversations between the levels is tricky, but in our district, yeah, I think part of the trick is to get the high schools talking too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what does a typical innovation day look like for you?
So it's, to be honest, I think it's really hard to call. It's hard to know. I mean, we I know in advance what's going to happen, but there are days that we could be at a conference out of state. There are days where we might be visiting a school in Rhode Island from Connecticut. The other day, because we're working on, we did this credit recovery last year, and universally, our teachers and our students thought it needed to be better. So I'm basically revising all the documents from last year's credit recovery program with my colleague, and we're gathering all the information so now we can meet with the teachers and see if the changes we've made based on their feedback is what they were looking for. And then because a lot of issues around credits and grades and really flow right through school policy, we had a meeting last week with central office to make sure they were in agreement with what we're doing. Now we have to talk to the building level principals to make sure that. So that's it's a lot of work. Even I mean that easily took up a day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to be honest, I mean we do spend a good deal of time doing research. We spend a good deal of time in conversation. I think that as these ideas have kind of floated in, And I think too, because I'm teaching, there's a significant part of my innovation day. I'm thinking about. I'm afforded the time. It's a luxury to think about what to do, how these apply to my classroom. So we spent a couple days talking to, well, working together, coming up with a habits of work rubric because we don't currently have them. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a great thing because I mean I have the next day I had students to see, so I walked in with them and asked them what they thought of it, and got their feedback. So that was great. I'm trying to think of what else. We have these capstone pilot programs going, so we're popping into that class, listening to what students have to say, so that we can shift the curriculum and make sure that it's even better next year. We have a responsibility to the business partners that are paying for this, so we do update them frequently on what we're up to. I think they're really excited about things like Capstone. My superintendent's ability to I think reach out to them to get them on board as a business community, and that they see young employees, they see what they're capable of and what they're not. And I think in some ways, our Board of Education and the business community is actually more knowledgeable about this shift than I think a lot of teachers and parents are right now. So I think that's kind of um, the next step. Um, and I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, my days vary enormously.
Yeah.
Um,
And how much guidance are you given in what you should be doing? The- Maybe not just each day, but like the initiatives that you should be working on, things like that.
I the the initiatives are part of our, I think, believe they're built into our strategic plan. So, I've got there's kind of a menu of things that came out of the first innovation team's work about best practices, and a lot of those were things like capstone, personalized learning, mastery-based grading. So in looking into them, naturally gravitated towards some versus others. Um, I also, but again, within them, I mean, mastery-based learning, there are a billion things I could work on. I'm really trying to envision shifting. I'm thinking about the school calendar right now and ways in which we could build office hours into our school day, and have that be something that's not just utilized fully by students, but utilized by teachers.
Mm-hmm.
So, and under this mastery-based grading thing, the thing I'm thinking of, well, we need flexible time. If we have students not meeting standards, we need the time to meet with them. Our
Mm-hmm.
buses leave 7 minutes after the school day's over, and that's problematic. We need to be able to, students, if we want a culture of revision, we need to honor the time and set it aside, so that those conversations can happen. And that actually, in large part, came out of when I was returning D work, because even though I had students that just stepped it up because I kept returning work, but the students that were struggling, that doesn't mean there's time built into our day outside of the class for them to get the help they needed. So I think that's a need. Teachers need that time, and I think that we spend so much time in our schools scheduled. I think there's very little time to be human beings, and I'm looking forward to that being time that can maybe be used. But there's some convincing to do. I mean, there are, like I said, I do a lot of union work. I have people in my union that think that's an extra duty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've got Board of Ed members that think teachers are going to be idle, and somewhere in the middle, we've got to figure that out. So back to your question, to be honest, there was some broad guidance. I'm a, there's not. Um, I really, my superintendent has really allowed us to take this in the direction we saw fit. I'm actually really happy about that. Um, there's some kind of guiding principles. We meet with him regularly. That's another thing in a district with 600 teachers. I mean, we're meeting with the superintendent every 2 weeks for sometimes a couple hours,
Mm-hmm.
and he's getting great insight about what's happening on the ground from those conversations. Um, and again, he certainly put some things on our radar here and there. And certainly, as we think about moving our district in this direction, that makes a lot of sense. But um, there's structure when we need it, and there's time to do what we think is necessary when we need that too.
Mm-hmm. So what does the accountability look like? I mean, you mentioned that you meet with the superintendent, you meet with the business leaders. What what does it actually look like? What kinds of things are they looking for to show that their money's being well spent, and the superintendent is making a good call on having you guys do this?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, so far they appear happy they renewed us. And,
That's good.
and they gave money again. I guess that's the feedback we needed. I think maybe the research part, which was more last year, is probably more difficult to gauge. But I think that, I mean, quite literally, we have Capstone going, we have Credit Recovery going, we have Bridge Academy going. Um, and these things, they're certainly not perfect, but they certainly reflect the work we put into them. We're constantly giving updates to our colleagues, to the kind of business roundtable that funds us, and also a think tank group that my superintendent formed in town. So I think that that's certainly keeping us focused. And now that things are implemented, I mean, I think I mean, physical things, programs exist for people to look at and to assess. And I think um, time is always, a commodity in short supply. But, we're already, as things have been implemented this year, thinking about how to improve them next year.
Mm-hmm. And have you, so they renewed you for this year. You don't know if they're going to renew you for next year. Is that right?
No, like, and to be honest, I didn't know we'd be renewed this year either. As we approach the end of the year, I think, I'm extremely fortunate to work with the colleague that I do. She teaches humanities and psychology on the other side of town. And it's strange. We didn't know each other very well at all prior to this, but we really complement each other very well. She's extremely savvy with technology. I am extremely not savvy with
Mm-hmm.
technology. We both have different skill sets that complement each other well. And the best thing is we really, on every important issue in education, we really see eye to eye. So it was around mid-year last year that our superintendent let us know that because we weren't given the full time sabbatical, he thought it made sense for us to do another year of this. Um, right. And so we took it. It's certainly something I thought about. It wasn't something that I'm not saying that I didn't want to do it, but I have to say it's a great deal of work. I mean, I think any teacher in my position, I've gone from 5 classes down to 2. And I think any teacher in my position, there are teachers all over the country, that if you cut the number of their classes in half, they would just devote all the time they used to on 5 to those 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's essentially what's happening. So I think it's almost like 2 jobs, but they kind of blend together. But it's really good work. It's exciting work, and whenever I get to talk to someone like you, or run into someone at a conference, and we introduce ourselves and explain what we're doing, I am, not that I need it, but I'm often reminded how rare this is, how much I wish it were replicated around the country, because I think again. I think putting teachers, empowering teachers to do this type of work is, I think, the best way to have it be, done faithfully, and to be done in a way that's informed by kind of everyday
Mm-hmm.
struggles that teachers have.
Yeah. So, I think you said a lot of great stuff. I I can see how there would be a temptation to just focus on how this is going to help your particular class, right?
Yeah.
And you're doing that. It is helping your particular class, but you're trying to see a bigger picture that is a school-wide, district-wide, even nationwide picture of how this can help in multiple ways. What are the benefits of allowing someone like you to do this for 2 years and then switching to someone else to give another person that opportunity? And what are the benefits of or drawbacks of doing that?
Um, that's a really good question. I mean, I think you really hit it on the head. There are 2 things happening. Like, number one, I've been asked to do things that, to be honest, I've grown enormously professionally in the last year and a half. I mean, I've just been given opportunities the regular meetings with Board of Ed and superintendents and
Mhm.
presentations I've given. There's just a skill set that I've been enabled to develop. But the larger thing is, if it's not impacting the system as a whole, then it's certainly not just about my growth. So that's, I mean, I think I think we need to think very carefully about the transition, because I think there needs to be some continuity. I think bringing someone new in is a great opportunity to add a maybe different subject area. One thing about mastery-based learning is that we have teachers that are intrigued by it, but I think very quickly their questions go to, we don't need to convince them about why, they go to the how. And I
Mhm.
think that the more teachers in different subject areas we can get involved in this work, the better. But I think that transition is important because it took some time for us to get up and running. And like I said, one of the great things about this was the notion that really I had the time to let ideas sink in. And so how to have the next group that does this have that time, and at the same time balance that with my desire to really, I wish I could just remove the contents of my head and place it in theirs, because I
Yeah.
think that a lot of my colleagues would, even those that are wary of this, I think a lot of my colleagues would come to many of the same conclusions that I have about this. And that's actually one of the best things about being chosen for this and not being directed about it. My colleague on the innovation team and I have commented that we really feel like we've been trusted to just expose ourselves to these ideas and to come to the right conclusions about them. And
Mhm.
that time to have been allowed to happen has been great. I also think too it might be good for that to shift towards middle school. The first innovation team was elementary, um, and the second was us, which has been extended. So I think that getting middle school teachers involved would be a great thing as well. I think in general, I mean, in some of our reading, a lot of the countries that are touted as being much more successful and better than us educationally, their teachers spend a lot less time teaching and more time collaborating.
Mhm.
So, as much as there's great potential in taking two teachers out of 571 offline, I mean, I think honestly, if we want the type of transformational change that I think a lot of us do, we need to, I think, rethink the schedule of the day. I mean, I think that um, as we try to form committees and get people invested in our work, I mean, they're still working at max right now. So I think the more teachers we can do this for, the better. But again, the trick is connecting that foot of ours that's outside of our school. It's really crucial that information is shared. So again, back to your question, I guess um, there'd be an advantage to the continuity of teachers continuing this, but I think the leadership development opportunities of bringing new people in, together with the fresh pair of eyes, together with the fact that my colleague and I are absolutely exhausted, um, and things like that. I think that it's better for it to shift. And it's interesting. I've been asked the same thing about the every other day. Would it be better to be offline completely, or would it be better to do it every other day? And even though it's more work, I think every other day is probably be better when it can be done. So.
Hmm. Cool. That's really really fascinating. What's one of the things that you think is um, the easiest thing to replicate in any district about the innovation team?
Um, Well, I don't know. A lot of it's not easy. I mean, I guess if it were easy, more people would be doing it, right?
Right.
As a classroom teacher, I go back to where we started. I made the most minimal changes in the way I assess and got immediate results
Mm-hmm.
that have changed the way I'm thinking, not just about assessment, but instruction. And again, if that policy comes from an administrator that just doesn't want to see D's on a transcript, I think that's problematic. But if a few teachers start trying these things, and this is where, it's a big ship to steer towards mastery learning, and that's why we're trying to get this committee we formed to really have teachers keep trying this stuff out. And I think on an individual level, systemic change is always difficult, but one great thing about teaching is the autonomy we have in at least a few areas in our classroom. And when teachers are given that autonomy and results, really good results happen, and those teachers converse with other teachers, I think it spreads. And I'm looking forward to seeing it spread more. It's spread minimally now, but I think that it's going to move more quickly. So the easiest stuff has been my classroom stuff because I can do it and I can actually talk to my students. I get immediate feedback. Like, believe me, they let me know very quickly on my how rubric what did not belong there and what they thought of it. They're brutally honest. But it's the systemic stuff that's harder. I mean, I so believe in capstone, but it is and I can't. Who wouldn't believe in something like that? And yet, it really, it really opened my eyes to all the different things that have to go right from the central office level all the way down to the classroom level. I mean, a lot of things have to be in place for that to happen. For teachers, yeah, I mean, a lot of things need to be pulling in the same direction, and that's why I think the biggest challenge is probably the buy-in. Like I don't deny I have some legitimacy as a teacher, but the minute one gets associated with central office initiatives, you lose some too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and as a result, the trick is to kind of connect back. So did that answer your question? You asked what was.
Uh,
Yes.
I asked what districts could do to start implementing parts of the innovation team without having all of the funding and everything that.
Without having to ask for money, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think you answered the question because you said it's about getting teachers to talk about these things and it's about getting teachers to have an opportunity to have buy-in
Yeah.
in the issue. And what you didn't say, but what I read from what you said was that teachers need an opportunity to discuss this and then they need an environment where they can try these things and it's okay if it doesn't turn out perfectly, right?
Yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. I mean, yeah, because it doesn't go perfectly, and that has to be. You clearly need a culture of trust. You need to, I needed backing for my administrator to try these things out, and to be honest, some of it's not a good fit. I mean, when the only thing worse than massive systemic change all at once is when you're trying to tweak things and other things are getting in the way. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly rating is one of those things. But I'd also highlight what my superintendent did. The conversation with business leaders and the community needs to start. It needs to take place. I mean, when that's not initiated by districts, then it goes the other way. You just have outside entities telling districts what they should be doing, and obviously my superintendent didn't start the conversation with I need money to take two teachers offline. There were relationships built over a couple of years and
Right.
some shared philosophy, and that after taking those initial steps, something like this becomes possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, relationships and taking time to build those relationships goes, in all directions, not just superintendent to businesses, but superintendent to principals, down to teachers, to
Sure,
parents and students and all that kind of stuff. And you have to have that relationship and that credibility with your students for them
sure.
to actually say how your rubric is um,
Yeah.
not accurate and not helpful to them.
Yeah,
So,
and I have no doubt I wasn't in the room, but I have no doubt my superintendent likely began those conversations by asking them what they were seeing in their employees. You know what I mean? Like
mm-hmm,
what are you but it's by listening to people and their concerns because initiatives in our district that have addressed what teachers deal with each and every day are the ones that catch fire, and ones that are just dropped down based on a perceived need are I think doomed to not go very well.
mm-hmm,
And I would also say that I think a lot of this stuff can be done small scale. Like I don't, a class could do a capstone project. It's not as maybe as um, to have teachers just simply take a unit of their instruction and give students more choices, open up the possibilities for assessment of it. For an English teacher to say, even we're going to work on writing skills, presentation skills, and research skills, and just let students choose how they're going to demonstrate that and give them time, I think is capstone on a very small scale.
mm-hmm,
Um, and we've started very small. We started with a pilot of 20. I think in our fantasy world, we're going to go from 20 at each high school to 250 or 300 at each high school for next year. That is thankfully not going to happen. But we're going to expand it to a couple more because honestly, we want it to go well. The capstone is also going to engage the community in ways that hasn't been before,
Right.
and it's a very public thing, which means we want it to go very well. And actually, I think I mentioned in my email, we just negotiated. I was negotiations chair for my union, and we're in a town that doesn't always want to fund education. And to be honest, if I flash forward 5, 10 years, when students are doing internships out in the community and community members are attending capstone presentations, I have to think that the conversation is going to be a lot different. Like
Mm-hmm.
when parents and non-parents see our students and work with them, I think it's going to increase their willingness to fund what we're doing and to be on board.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so powerful to get them involved in not just being a parent, but in being a community member and seeing the kids and having that be public. I think there's a lot of real value in that. So, before we close, what advice do you have for a principal who's thinking about empowering his teachers more and giving them more opportunities to be innovative? What advice do you have for that principal to help them start something like this, even if it's small? What things do they need to be doing?
Well, I mean, that's the trick. I mean, I think in some ways I'm more freed up than my principal is to work on this stuff. And I guess, I mean, the trick is, I think this has to be this. I think some priorities have to be framed, um, because you can't just hand over the reins. But at the same time, in the case of my superintendent on a district level, by laying out some possibilities, and then after that, trusting that if you find the right people, that they're going to take it in the right direction. I think a lot of it's trust. I mean, teachers, the right teachers given time, I think most teachers are going to use that time to address things that they're facing in their classroom all the time. And I would also say, there's a part of me. I'm getting my administrative certification. I'm working on it now, and I'm up in the air. I don't know if I want to take that plunge or not, but and one reason I hesitate is I really think that our teachers are in the best position to identify what needs to happen moving forward, in the same way that I think our students know more than sometimes teachers give them credit. I think that principals really have the trust and to empower the right teachers to kind of come to the right conclusions about things,
Mm-hmm.
because we're the ones that feel the impact. And I think, since I don't think I just don't see any initiative working without buy-in, and I think the way to do that is to bring teachers on board very early. And I think we have found too, what thing we're moving towards this year that we didn't do enough of in the past is really bringing more students into the conversation on our committees. I mean, why didn't it immediately occur to us that we needed students on a committee that was going to create a capstone project? I mean, that's such a
Right.
no-brainer, but we forget. And I think that sometimes administrators forget that the boots on the ground are the teachers and the students. And so when you get them involved and get them on the same page, I think it's a powerful opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Ken, I so appreciate your time today and helping me learn more about what you're doing and sharing with all the people who listen. Where can people go to get a hold of you or learn more from you? A website or contact information that you're willing to share?
Sure. My email address is kdaly, that's KDALY, at Wallingford, .k12.ct, .us. And actually, if you reach out to me, I can send you a couple websites that my colleague and I have been working on. So that'd be great.
Great. Can I put those in the show notes? Can you send those to me and I'll just share them with everybody if that's all right?
Sure, piece of cake.
Great. Thank you so much again. And I've learned a ton. I know a lot of people are going to learn a ton, and hopefully this is something that we can start spreading across the nation. So thanks so much for your time, Ken.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye. Thank you so much for downloading and listening to this podcast. Please subscribe in iTunes or Stitcher, and please feel free to give us a rating on Stitcher Radio or on iTunes so that we can help spread the word about how much we're learning in this podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones.